Nice to have you all on here. To finally get to speak to you.
Hello.
Hey. I brought my friends with me.
Yeah, so just for everyone who's joined today, so we've got Alkimi Exchange on to speak about ads on labs, and I believe there's a few members of the team who are sat around the table, so I'll just get the team just to introduce themselves if you don't mind.
Hey everyone, this is Ben. I am the CEO of Alkimi.
Hi, Shorley, COO, co-founder with Ben and Chandru.
Hello, my name is Chandru, and I'm the CTO and co-founder of Alkimi.
Cheers, folks. It's great to have you here today. So yeah, as I said previously, we're here to talk about the ads on labs. I know you've had a really successful week, and congratulations on the release of the Ad Explorer. Looks really good, and I've been looking at it all week, and I'm really impressed by it. So congratulations on that, and I believe that's potentially going to be a part of the ads on labs that we're going to be discussing today.
Yes, that's right. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, I believe this is the first AMA I've had with yourselves. Just for members of the community that don't know who Alkimi are, I don't know, just in a quick summary, one of you guys want to feel free just to kind of put across who you are to the people that haven't heard about you before?
Yeah, of course. So Alkimi Exchange is a decentralized advertising exchange. And for those of you that might not know what an advertising exchange is, it effectively facilitates the buying and selling of ads in real time. So any ad that you might see within an app or on a website, or ads that you've heard in between your podcasts or even on connected TVs, often those ads are bought in real time. It's a process called real-time bidding, and effectively advertisers will bid an amount of money to show their ad on a particular publisher. So whether that's a website or an app, as I said previously, that has existed for, I would say, 2014. Yeah. So it's been around for a while. The standard by which all of this is called OpenRTB. So it's an open source protocol, and probably at this point 99% of the ads that you would see online are traded using OpenRTB. That currently, the centralized exchanges face a number of issues, predominantly focused around transparency of fees, or rather lack thereof, the volume of the fees, fraud, and actually the number of emissions that are produced, and kind of works out to, for every dollar that is spent by an advertiser, typically a publisher would only see 57 cents of that dollar. So 43 is lost to middlemen, to server discrepancies, and 17% actually off the back of a recent study that came out a couple of weeks ago. We'll send a link after this, but 17% is an unknown delta. So 17% of what is I think going to be $500 billion market just disappears into thin air. So if you want to do the maths, it's quite a big number that goes missing. And what we're actually able to do by bringing this entire process onto a blockchain is solve a number of those issues. I mean, the number one issue where we've had a lot of traction is around the fees. So Alkimi only charges 3% versus the 43% that is lost into centralized advertising exchanges. We have the Ads Explorer, which you can see on labs.alkimi.org, which is finally a verifiable means of all the ads that have served, which doesn't exist currently. There's a lot of spreadsheets that get compared within businesses that serve ads at the moment. And lastly, because of a lack of a ledger that is notarizing all of the ad transactions that everyone can access and no one needs to trust, a lot of businesses repeat the same processes over and over again. Typically, there will be 8 hops between an advertiser and a publisher. With Alkimi Exchange, all of that takes place with one of the nodes or validator nodes within our network. So we actually reduce the number of processes that are taking place by a factor of 8. So it's actually significantly more efficient than the existing solutions in terms of carbon emission. I'll take a pause there in case.
Yeah. Just to add to that, I was asked exactly the same question, Ben. last night by my son.
Oh yeah.
Who said, "What is an ad exchange? What is it that you do when you go to office?" And the way I had to explain this to him is, Alkimi Ad Exchange is like eBay for ads, right? So somebody posts their pair of shoes on eBay, and there are 5 different people who say, okay, I'm willing to pay $50, $60, $70, $80, $90, $100, whatever the amount. But look at Ad Exchange as eBay for ads, except that when you put your pair of shoes for sale, eBay doesn't tell you the amount. eBay doesn't tell you how much each person is bidding, who is bidding, and what is the highest amount that they can get for you out of all of these independent bidders. eBay just tells you, oh, by the way, this pair of shoes for which you wanted a minimum of $50, you got 55 for it. Congratulations. But behind the scenes, and I'm not saying eBay does this, but I'm just trying to create an analogy between what happens on an ad exchange and a normal platform like eBay, a normal platform like eBay. But if eBay were to tell you, here's $55 which you got, and by the way, don't ask me for any more details. But if eBay were to also have an internal bidder who would say, I'm only willing to pay $55, and even though there are different bids of 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, if eBay were to tell you, this is 55, this is how much you could make, that is an ad exchange, a legacy ad exchange today, where the ad exchanges run by Google, for example, they don't tell you who are the bidders who are bidding on that ad slot, how much they bid for, and what is the maximum amount you as a publisher can make. And that is the core of the lack of transparency. And that is a problem, that's the classic problem that Alkimi is trying to resolve.
That's a perfect analogy. Like you said, that puts it crystal clear and kind of puts it in a context that we can all understand. And when you say that, Chandru, really like sinks in, and you can kind of see what the lack of transparency has been over time, especially with ads. And like you said, even just the 3% to the 43% is absolutely huge. And like you said as well, with the transparency of not knowing who's bidding on an ad, kind of the transactions which I wanted to look at, which I'm sure you go into as well, like the hashing side of it. Once the transaction and a bid's been made, obviously like Bitcoin and other cryptos, it's hashed on every transaction. That's kind of what's been missing in this industry for a very long time, and it's really interesting to see you guys try and tackle it head on.
Yeah, exactly that. I think it's I don't think it's just the kind of hashed transactions. I think the fact that the entire auction is now happening on chain, I think that is what really sets us apart from. There's been like a handful of other projects that have tried to tackle it, right? Like Brave is an amazing project. They went down the kind of browser route, and I think that's where they've kind of run into difficulties, that it's tough to get browser acquisitions as like a B2C type product. Whereas because we've used infrastructure to create the consensus mechanism that already is widely used by businesses, it kind of allows us to go to like a B2B2C approach, which has been kind of, it's working out okay so far.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, with regards to having that open transparency, not just the hashing side of it, but having that open transparency to see it on the blockchain is something that obviously like Google and other businesses like that who have obviously managed this aspect of the industry before haven't published, and people don't know where the money's going. People don't know what a bid is, and that's kind of been the big issue in a minute, especially, which I'm sure you'll all touch on later, with regards to the ad fraud side and the amount of money that's being lost, and just people just kind of accept it.
Exactly that, yeah. I think Google are a particularly interesting one. They're definitely of interest to DOJ at the moment, and I think that is them monopolizing this industry for too long. I think that with that and Meta kind of happening in the last decade or so, you have seen publishers really suffer. I mean, I spent a period of my career working for News UK. Charlie used to work for Condé Nast, so we kind of saw firsthand the impact of platforms like Google and Meta really taking the revenue away from the people that are creating the value. And that is really what we set out to do, was reestablish the value exchange online. So advertisers effectively fund content and try and pay for your attention as a user. I think that has got a little bit out of hand. It's why you've seen regulations like the GDPR and CCPA come into place. And I think just by providing a transparent and efficient means of trading ads, we can kind of work to undo some of the damage that has done to what are pretty like world famous, renowned businesses that have been in writing content for many, many years.
Yeah, many years, like you said, it's not something that's kind of been looked at recently. Obviously, something like this has taken a very long time to kind of set up. And with regards to what we talk about for ads on labs, what does that actually mean? Can you go into a bit more detail on that?
You want to take this one, Chandru?
Sure. I'll probably talk about what ads on labs means from a technical sense. I'll probably let you take the one on what it means for our ecosystem partners.
Sure,
then.
yeah.
But I think we've been working on this project for the last year and a half now. And there's a lot of work that has been put into building a decentralized ad exchange. And Ads on Labs brings together all of the work that we have done so far and demonstrated to our community in parts. I remember once one of our first demos that we did for the community was to show the MVP of an ad exchange that was working. Then we did another demo showing how custom consensus works for the Alkimi State channel. We also were looking at various reporting dashboards. But all of this work that has gone on to building a decentralized ad exchange over the last year and a half is all brought together and demonstrated to all of our community and ecosystem partners using the Ads on Labs project. So what this actually means is it demonstrates the technical capability of the product on various fronts. So by going live with Ads on Labs, what we have done is, now there are three major parts of this ecosystem. There are many links in this supply chain, but if I can just break it down into three basic parts. One is the supply side, which is where the publishers come into picture. They provide the real estate on which the ads are shown. On the other side, which is the demand side, are the brands who want to show the ads to the users on the publisher's website. And the matchmaker between the publisher and the demand side is the ad exchange. So what we have done is, number one, we have used Alkimi Labs, which has over 1,000 registered users, as the publisher's site. So we've said, look, let us demonstrate this using our own in-house publishing site, which is Alkimi Labs. Now, for the brands, so that's the supply side. On the demand side, we said, look, let us use some of our brands in-house, our partners' brands, the agency, the Alkimi Exchange itself, and demonstrate, show the advertisements of Alkimi Exchange and the agency and our podcast on this publisher site. And the matchmaker between those two is Alkimi Exchange. So in order to bring that together, Alkimi Labs is the publisher, and the Alkimi Ad Exchange connects to Alkimi Labs, which is the publisher. And the way that is done is using what we refer to as a pre-bid adapter. And we had communicated to our community quite a long time back that Alkimi's pre-bid adapters are already live. So the first thing that is demonstrated by this is that Alkimi's pre-bid adapters are ready to be integrated with any publisher of choice, as has been demonstrated by integrating with Alkimi Labs. That's point number one. Point number two is the ad exchange itself needs to comply with what is called IAB's TCF framework. And this is an essential step for any publisher who would want to integrate with Alkimi Exchange. And that's the second thing that we have demonstrated. That is, without the TCF framework compliance, this could not have been possible. And this demonstrates the compliance for IAB's TCF framework. That is point number two. Point number three is that the Alkimi Labs as a publisher would send what we refer to as bid requests, and these bid requests are sent to the demand side, responses are collected, and then the auction is conducted, ads are rendered onto users. This is the whole flow. So this is demonstrated when any user goes on to Alkimi Labs and refreshes the homepage. You see new ads being shown to you every time. what is happening in the background is this whole process, this whole auction that we are talking about is conducted within about 200 milliseconds, and the ads are rendered onto the user to see. And that is an end-to-end view of how a Web 2 ad exchange would work. Everything that I have stated so far is just a Web 2 ad exchange. This is where it gets interesting. Not only are those auctions being conducted and ads are shown to the users, but what is also done is all of these ad transactions are validated using the custom consensus mechanism, and the result of that custom consensus mechanism, which is the validated ad transaction data, is stored on a decentralized ledger, and then that is made available to the users via the Ads Explorer. That is what makes this a Web3 exchange. Any exchange could conduct an ad auction and show users the advertisement. But the very fact that all of this is done decentrally, it's validated by a system of decentralized nodes, and that validated data is captured on the ledger, made available to everybody using the Ads Explorer, is what makes it a Web3 or a decentralized ad exchange. I'll take a pause.
Perfect. Thank you, Chandru. Sorry, go on.
So not only are we actually have we built a decentralized ad exchange, what we take it one step further, where we have access to all of the raw data that is generated by the exchange. Now, all of this data cannot be put on the ledger for the simple reason that some of them may be user PII data, there may be some data that some of the publishers may be sensitive towards, or it may just be way too much data to put on the ledger, right? So what we do is to capture raw data or a richer data set of the chain. And in order to ensure that our partners have the trust on off-chain data, what we do is that this data is validated before it's put onto our database, and a hash value of that data is stored on the ledger. So our partners can actually programmatically, using APIs, retrieve that off-chain data, compute the hash value, and check the hash value against those hash values stored on the ledger. Thereby, not only are we putting important pieces of data on the ledger, but any data that is stored off the chain is also auditable just by the fact that the hash value of that data is stored on the chain. So this gives all of our partners complete transparency and auditability. And that's one of the key features of Alkimi Exchange. And this end-to-end has been demonstrated using the Ads on Labs project.
Yeah, I think
that's great. Sorry,
the idea of an ad exchange is it's not really something you can like touch or poke. And I think that because there are, I think there's something crazy like 11 billion potential ads that can be filled online in the UK alone. So actually finding ads in the wild can be quite a difficult thing to do. So being able to demonstrate on our own profile on our own pages kind of shows it's existing. It's a very key part of what we demonstrate to clients that we work with, just so they can have faith in what we're saying is actually exists and that it is reporting accurate data based off of ad transactions that are taking place.
Yeah, I think it's important to sort of compare that to the incumbents right now. So like that data that you see every transaction that goes on there, that is what we call log level data. That information currently, if you're using, for example, Google, who are the biggest, you have to pay $600 per report for that log level data. So that data is just available through the Ads Explorer. So that means that any publisher or any advertiser, they can finally see information that was hidden from them by someone like Google. So for that reason alone, it's quite big, and it kind of demonstrates the key USP of Alkimi compared to what exists right now.
Yeah, definitely. Going on to what Chandru said as well about the hashing side of it and having that audibility log and being able to retrieve the API. And I only found out recently over the last year that you can extract the raw data from obviously blockchains and wallets transactions to kind of see and audit different logs and different things on a ledger. So it's really interesting to see you tackle it that way and obviously portray the transparency and the fact that these people who are involved with Alkimi and even people like us who are involved as holders of the ADS token who are part of the community will obviously be able to see and be able to, I suppose some people may want to investigate themselves just to see just how transparent and how fluid you are, and how being able to, especially in the industry that you're tackling, being able to retrieve that API and that raw data from the ledger is something that's going to make yourself stand out miles ahead of the rest.
Exactly that. And, it's very important for us to provide transparency and auditability. But one of the key factors that we also have to consider is compliance to regulations and respecting user privacy. And with that in mind, we just cannot put any user PII data on the blockchain. It cannot be on the public ledger. So all of the user PII data, for example, has to be stored off the chain. But there needs to be some sort of an auditability where, if you were to go onto the Ads Explorer now and look at the hash values of each of the transactions, what we post is the hash value of, for example, the bid request transaction, the hash value of each bid response that was received for that bid request. Hash values of impression objects. Impression objects are what tells you if an ad created an impression, if it was seen by a user or not. So each of this is validated data, but there can be a potential, if there isn't a hash value recorded on the chain, for off-chain data to be manipulated. And the only way of handling that problem is to ensure that the hash values of off-chain data is stored on the chain. So it tackles two problems. One is the auditability problem, and the second is the problem of, well, not a problem, but really a challenge of compliance to regulations and respecting user privacy.
Great, thanks for that, Chandru. Just out of interest as well, when we talk about hashing, just if there's any technical people listening, what hashing do you use? Do you use it the SHA-256 like the other sort of like Bitcoin uses to flow through transactions? Is it that sort of similar hashing?
Exactly, we use SHA-256.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you for that. And as well, Chandru, when we've talked about, obviously, you've gone into how much effort's been put into it, and I suppose you mentioned already some of the difficulties in Web3. Just as a question, I don't know if anyone else in the team as well can put any input on it, but just how difficult has it been kind of creating an ad exchange in Web3? Like, what's the difficulties that you've seen, and is there any difficulties that you expect to face in the future?
I think that's a very interesting question, really, because well, even before I can answer what's the difficulty in building a decentralized ad exchange. I think we all are aware of the kind of difficulties that any startup faces, and especially a startup in the Web3 world, I think faces way too many challenges. The number of challenges in terms of limited resources, or the amount of time that we have to build stuff, the kind of market pressures that we are under, and this is true for any Web3 project. For example, it's not just Alkimi that I'm talking about. Any Web3 startup would have issues of resources, issues of ensuring that the product goes live within a certain time period, ensuring that we are aware of the market conditions and have to deal with the market conditions, the volatility of the market, and also expectations of various stakeholders, whether they are ecosystem partners or the community or anybody else. So we are actually being pulled into different directions by all of these factors, and I think that forms the crux of the challenge that any Web3 project faces. One of the key things that, in the advertising world especially, there's an additional challenge where we are being pulled between two different ends of the community and the ecosystem partners, because the community generally is very open to change and wants new technologies to be brought in, while the ecosystem partners will have their own business processes. They will need to vet all of the processes. They will have to validate that this really adds value to the way they do business. The way they do business shouldn't really be changing quite a lot. So one is not so open to change, while the other is really, they're open to change. So we are really caught between the two different pulls of the community and the ecosystem partners. So that is something that is also a challenge. But I think it's been a great experience in building the decentralized ad exchange. And what I've realized is that there are quite a lot of good things that we can learn from the Web 2 world and take that forward for the Web 3 world. Like, for example, we use best practices, like we use our sprint planning sessions, for example, and we ensure that everything gets planned, the sprint is executed, there are daily stand-ups, there are sprint retrospectives. We're really big on that. I'm a huge fan of that. And also, ensuring that the tests are developed in parallel with all of the functions that are being, all of the functionalities that are being developed, ensuring that security is baked into the functionalities. There's a lot of good practices that we can actually take from the Web 2 world and then move that into the Web 3 world. So we do really have to get creative because of all of these challenges in terms of resources, time. But yeah, I think these are some of the things that have been really interesting, and it's been a great learning experience, is all I can say.
Yeah, I think with all that said, I think, Chandru, you've been quite modest. I think that from what I've seen, having worked in this industry for, I guess, a decade now, which is quite a long time, it takes a long time for exchanges to get to market. So the fact that we've, I guess, effectively delivered this inside of 2 years already has us kind of trending. We've delivered it in half the time I would typically expect for an exchange to hit the market and start to gain traction. So I think that is where Web3 is probably an advantage, that everyone in it wants to work very quickly. They want to get more people adopting better ways of doing most things, I think, in the world, life. But yeah, in our instance specifically, creating new infrastructure for ads to be traded is something that now we can say we've done. We've proven it with Ads on Labs, and that is just really taken on the conversations that we've been having with advertisers and publishers versus the last 18 months. We've had a number of people testing for a period of time now, and I think like having Ads on Labs has allowed us to really scale up the number of people that we speak to on a weekly basis. So yeah, we are really excited for the next quarters ahead, really.
Ultimately, Chandru is the secret sauce.
Yeah. Everyone needs a Chandru, yeah.
When we speak about the difficulties you've been facing in Web3, one of the kind of main questions I've always wanted to ask yourselves is, I know quite a lot of projects and even people in the mainstream industry, even when you speak to people new now who are kind of a bit umming and ahhing about whether or not to get involved in crypto, are you finding any difficulty kind of getting people to persuade to kind of jump to Web3? Has that been an issue?
I think given some of the people that we speak to still print newspapers, those conversations have been difficult. But I think on the whole, I think that for me in particular, I think it was NFTs last year that had like all of a sudden made the conversation much easier for us. Like there are a significant handful of household brands that are now dipping their toe into the Web3 space using NFTs, which interact with the blockchain. It's a really nice way to onboard brands. So I think that has changed the conversation that we've been having, I think, over the last 6 months or so. And then I think it's just, apologizing for the bad actors that exist in the space.
I think it's interesting when, like, Facebook changing then into Meta. I mean, we've said it quite a few times, but that really was just like suddenly a bunch of CMOs who had never heard of a metaverse were thrown into like Web3 in a big way and had to like learn it pretty quickly. So I think that really did weirdly help everybody else other than Meta. Like they're sandbagging themselves with huge bills at the moment instead of building any technology. But I think for everybody else, it was actually they created a vacuum, and then it was a case of like who's going to fill that vacuum. And yeah, hopefully we're bringing Web3 to digital advertising, and there's plenty of other people doing other things in the Web3 space that relate to sort of publishers and advertisers. So it's pretty good from that point of view. It's definitely in the press right now.
Yeah, I think also like one of the mantras we have at Alkimi HQ is meet the market where it is and then tell them where it needs to go. Just made that last second actually. And I think the way in which we've done that is, again, the team has like a depth of experience. I mean, I think probably if we added it all up, it's like 100 years experience of working in ad tech. Makes us feel old, doesn't it? But so we know this market intimately. We kind of all discovered blockchain, Bitcoin, Ethereum, various cryptos on our own like origin stories, which we probably go into at one point in the future. But that kind of being advertising first, discovering crypto, and then bringing it back to advertising, I think gives us a very unique perspective versus businesses that identify the $500 billion digital ad market as a low-hanging fruit. I can tell you that it's not. So yeah, I think just our continuous effort to meet the market where it is, to make it easy to move to Web3, and actually probably a better way of putting it is taking the best parts, the most relevant parts of Web3 and bringing that to Web2, which is ubiquitous. It is everywhere. Everyone is using it, is ultimately how we will kind of, everyone will arrive at Web3 by improving Web2. I think rather than there being like a monumental shift to Web3, I don't think that's going to happen.
It's not like moving from your PlayStation 4 to 5.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like there is a transitional period, and I think that's like one thing that people always, the slogan is always like, bridging Web 2 and Web 3, but really it's like Web 2 has a lot to offer that works and is effective. So like you can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater and just be like, oh yeah, I'm totally Web 3. It's like you have to do some of those things in Web 2 well, and then find the cool stuff that like helps you create future products in Web 3 and then mash them together.
Yeah.
Rather than just kind of thinking that you can do it all one way or the other.
Yeah, I think, and that's why as well, like Chandru said earlier, I think that's why the release of the Ad Explorer is kind of, when you do speak to these people and these companies and people who obviously who have been in Web 2 and are a bit kind of reluctant to join Web 3, when you kind of break down them boundaries, and like Isabel said, having that Ad Explorer openly available to see the ads being bidded on and the prices and the transactions being verified on the ledger, having that open and then being able to showcase that to a company, to someone in the industry who has been wanting to kind of get back the money they've lost and kind of get that transparency back from what's never been there in essence. So kind of having that Ad Explorer available, like you said earlier on, is a big leap in where you're heading, and I can only imagine over the next few months and years it's just going to grow exponentially, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's also one of the key takeaways of Ads on Labs, because it will allow anybody, whether that's a publisher or an advertiser or anybody in the supply chain, or even end users or community members, to go onto Alkimi Labs, open the homepage, and then you will be able to look at the bid requests. If you go onto the developer window, and if you were to copy the bid request ID, go back to Ads Explorer, and then if you try and find that bid request ID, you will be able to do that. And not only will you be able to find that bid request, you will be able to see all the information about that ad that was shown to you. So this is exactly what the publishers and the advertisers want to see. And this is a living proof of that. So anybody from our sales team who talks to a publisher or an advertiser would just have to provide them with one link, which is the Alkimi Labs link, and they will be able to test, look at the features, and they will know exactly what to do, what data that ad rendering has generated. So everything is there for them to see. There's no hiding. There is no there's no pitch deck. It's just about you have a look at the ad being shown to you. You have a look at the bid request. Go to Ads Explorer, you can find it there. You can find all the data associated with it. So it's a living demonstration for anybody in the ecosystem who wants to use Alkimi Exchange.
Perfect. Thank you, Chandru. And what you just said in relation to that, it goes on to the next question I had in relation to the advertisers and publishers. Just, I know we've touched on it briefly, but what does it kind of mean for them as a whole, the whole concept of the ads on labs?
So I think what it means really is that there is now a viable alternative to the existing technology that they use. I think there's a lot of businesses in ad tech that have really innovated around ad formats. So when I first started, I was selling interstitials on mobile, which was like pretty hot. Lots of accidental clicks, I think, but not if you ask my clients. And then there was kind of in-stream video, there was native ad units, there was pre-roll, mid-roll, post-roll on like typically stuff you see on YouTube, like the Monday.com ads before YouTube video, a bit of a classic. And that was largely where a lot of the innovation took place. And then there was regulations in terms of GDPR. So the targeting of ads was also innovated, whether that was contextual targeting, cookie-based targeting using device IDs. Cookies disappearing, device IDs have largely gone. Contextual is when you kind of target ads based off the content on the page itself. Can prompt some interesting results. No one's really kind of taken the infrastructure and looked for ways to improve that. And I mean, there was a great analogy someone explained to me a long time ago, and it's the kind of the OpenRTB protocol really was the designs for quite a slick house. And I think over time, where more people have arrived, there's kind of been a dodgy extension put on the back, or like a tree house in the back garden that kind of is held together by chewing gum and blue tack. And what we're really doing is using a blockchain to take that plan, but allow for a much better house to be built, to really thrash the end of that analogy. So yeah, and that really means on a business perspective that advertisers get more media for their money, publishers make more money from selling the ads, and it really allows for the open web to continue in a way that we know it, because it is supported by an ad-funded model, which has worked so effectively for the last kind of 20 years or so. And I think the other, kind of take it on from advertisers and publishers to users of the internet, kind of ads on labs was required for us to begin looking to the community for people that are going to operate the nodes that support Alkimi Exchange in the future. You know, like we are now at a point where we can start to like distill information around what it's going to take to be a node operator, what kind of the expectations are, and really then that is starting to onboard the $500 billion market or $500 billion liquidity pool onto a blockchain. The protocol then takes fees for all of the ads that are served, and then those fees are used to buy back tokens to redistribute as rewards to people that are validating transactions on the network itself. So it starts to become kind of the vision that we've always had for it, whereby the internet is supported by the people that use the internet every day, whether that's a user, a publisher, an advertiser. Kind of everyone can operate a node, everyone can then be rewarded for facilitating the transactions, which typically took place in centralized servers where one party saw most of the benefit. So yeah, it's, when you put it like that, it feels quite big, yeah, isn't it?
The value exchange, really.
Exactly that, yeah, is created a value exchange.
Yeah, when you talk about the numbers there, it's quite, when you kind of think about it and you take a step back and you kind of look at how much money the market, kind of the market cap is for what you are targeting, you don't really comprehend how much it is, and it's just absolutely huge, the kind of the industry you're going for. And so like you said, having those node operators to being able to validate obviously the bids and the transactions on the Ad Explorer and being able to kind of capture that market. Like you said, it's just difficult to comprehend those sorts of numbers, really.
Exactly, because there are billions of these ad transactions. So what we are building needs to be scalable and robust in order to take on more publishers and advertisers. That's the only way this can continue to operate. We need to be scalable, and that is only possible by making it as decentralized as possible.
Yeah, I think to like put that number into perspective, like if you influencer marketing, I think people probably, because everyone spends a lot of time on Instagram and Facebook and wherever else you want, other platforms there are, Twitter, I suppose. That market globally is $15 billion rather last year. So compared to I want to say it was $486 billion last year, but don't quote me on that. So yeah, kind of just that compared to what you see in a channel like in influencer marketing, you can see it's significantly larger. So yeah, it is really the workhorse for most of the brands in the world, frankly.
Yeah.
Cheers for that. And sorry, go on.
Sorry, just to touch upon another aspect of how this affects publishers and advertisers. I think we also need to look at the data aspect here, because there is so much of data that is available on the Ads Explorer itself. So from a publisher's perspective, let's say the publisher knows the bid requests that have originated from their website. Now, it is possible for the publishers to get hold of all the bid response data corresponding to all of these bid requests. And this is available on the Ads Explorer, available to anybody. And they can look at how the bidders are actually bidding on each of these bid requests. And that may be determined by the time of the day. That may be determined by the geographical location. That may be determined by a segment that the user is part of, or it may be determined by the type of content that is being shown on that page. So there's so much of data that the publishers have, which they can overlay on top of the bid response data to determine how bidders are bidding based on each of these factors. And what they can do is to use that data to determine what is the minimum price they ask for an ad to be shown for a user from a certain geographical location, reading content of a certain type, and belonging to a certain user segment. So there's so much of value that the publishers can get from just by looking at the data that is on the chain, and top it all with the rich data sets that we have off the chain, because now they have complete auditability of off-chain data. They can use our APIs to get access to that off-chain data and then use that to determine the asking price for each of these ad slots. If you flip that around, you can look at the data sets from the advertiser's perspective. They can look at how much is actually being, how much of their bid price is actually reaching the publishers, and hence how can they alter their bidding strategy in order to ensure that the publishers get the same value for their ad slots, or maybe even higher for their ad slots, without actually taking a hit on the advertiser side. So as advertisers, they can actually lower their bid price and still ensure they win the ad auctions, and still ensure that their ad gets shown to the right kind of users from the right geographical locations, browsing the right kind of content, and belonging to the right kind of user segments. So there is so much that both the publishers and the advertisers can gain just using this data. And this is just from the data perspective. And as Ben was saying, there's also the scalability factor where there's reduced transaction fees. There's also making the supply chain more efficient. There's also removing redundancy and then providing a greener alternative to legacy exchanges. And we refer to this within Alkimi as TLC, which is T being transparent and auditable data, L is lower fees, and C is carbon friendliness. So all three of which is being achieved by Alkimi Exchange.
That was a great analysis, Chandru. Cheers for that. Obviously, we spoke about money and how much the market cap is, and kind of the money that's being lost in like the 3% regards to the over 40% of what the current kind of expectation is within the market. It's not just about money, and it'll kind of allows publishers, like you said, advertisers to kind of focus on their kind of mission statements, their goals, and kind of targeting certain aspects of like different geographical areas, like you said. So not just the money side of it, it's kind of like what a company's goals are to hit throughout the year and what their kind of mission statement is. It'll kind of empower a lot of businesses to kind of facilitate and achieve their own goals, which I find quite interesting as well.
Yeah, I would say it's one of those kind of unnoticed side effects of what goes on within the advertising industry is the sort of degradation of the quality of journalism. I know like it's something for the tinfoil hat wearer sometimes, but in reality, these companies have been losing half their revenue to a Google or Facebook, whoever. That means they've laid off staff, and those staff are, either salespeople or they're journalists, and that leads to kind of a degradation in quality of journalism, and actually probably a limitation on like things like freedom of speech. So I always think it's quite an interesting sort of hangover from what appears to be just like an industry that kind of is self-congratulating and whatever else, and like basically just there to make money for other companies. But really, like when you look at what the media and newspapers are there to do, is to hold governments to account and make sure that everybody is informed about things that are happening around the world. And if they are reducing the amount that they're spending on that means that the quality of it goes down. And it's like one of those things. I actually studied like politics at uni, so I'm quite an advocate for like things like free speech and freedom. And it always struck me that it was just this weird thing that nobody really talked about, because it was just actually about newspapers like reading figures going down, and like nobody was really focusing on the kind of what that actually meant for anyone. It's just like, it just means that XYZ newspaper is now worth less than it was 20 years ago because of the internet. But the net on net effect of those things is actually like something like the quality of journalism, freedom of speech, the ability for governments to be held to account. So I think there's like these kind of broader factors that it feeds into that kind of people don't necessarily think about. So I always like to think that we're doing something good for the world as well as just selling ads.
Yeah, definitely agree with that one. It's not just selling ads and looking at that. It's kind of, there's been so many positives and so many kind of different aspects you can look at with regards to what yourselves offer. It's like it's advertisers, publishers, it's the whole industry as a whole, even the community, which is kind of what I wanted to move on to next, if you don't mind, as well as kind of what does Ads on Labs mean for the community, for obviously people like myself and investors and shareholders of Alkimi. What does it mean for them, this Ads on Labs?
Yeah, I mean, I think like in the first instance, like it proves that we've kind of been building through a bear market. It's like everyone in the industry always talks about being a biddler and all the rest of it, but I mean, we know that isn't always the case when you look at what's going on with FTX and all those kind of things. But I mean, it's proof that like we have been like trying to complete our mission statement throughout like the last 2 years, and that we've actually like achieved that. And then it kind of allows us like to look forward into the future about the other things that we might do. But beyond that, I think like we're looking towards community members being able to be onboarded as node operators. I think that's kind of what everybody's like ultimately here for. I know, we managed to get everybody excited about a programmatic ad exchange, which I never thought would happen. But really, like for every community member to become a node operator means that they're helping to support that, all those good things that I just spoke about before. But also, it means that they'll be rewarded for helping us build out the network, and therefore like make it cheaper for both advertisers and publishers to use it. So I think that's quite kind of like the biggest thing that take away for everybody in the community is like this means that the network exists, and like the future part of that is having like node operators to help validate those transactions, as you're seeing happen on the Ads Explorer. And yeah, kind of the more people that use the network, obviously that means the more rewards and more buybacks that we can like give back to those node operators. So it's kind of like that virtuous cycle that we're getting into. So once we've got a few more node operators on board and we build the network out, there'll be rewards for certain regions where we have new advertisers and publishers being onboarded, as well as just general rewards and buybacks going into that.
Perfect, thank you. And just out of interest for anyone that's obviously new, obviously to yourself hearing it today, is there anything, obviously looking at price appreciation and token supplies, up until now onto when that kind of releases for the community for people to kind of get involved and be the node validators? Is there any kind of, and obviously you may not want to disclose it at the moment in time, it may still be underway, but kind of like has it been hard to kind of work out how many you'd need to kind of to be able to facilitate and kind of run a node? Regards to the token aspect, with regards to obviously how many transactions can be verified on ADS Explorer, or has it been quite simple from that aspect?
I think theoretically it's very simple. I think when we put it into practice, we always look to make efficiencies, and that is kind of ongoing. We don't want the number to be too high. We want as many people as possible be able to run nodes. The more validators we have validating transactions, the more stable the network is. So yeah, there's a couple of levers that we're pulling at the moment.
Yeah, I mean there'll be different cohorts that come on at different times, and the way that we pick the node operators for those cohorts should be at least entertaining. And we've got a few things in the works for that. So that will be we'll be releasing more information about that as the quarter goes on. But in terms of like actual like throughput, obviously we kind of understand how much throughput you can get through a cluster, but scaling that up over multiple publishers and multiple kind of geolocations as well is something that is more to do with like kind of trial and error and stress testing it. And yeah, Chandru's team has been putting stress through the system to like check it's working, and then also just to see where we actually sit on that TPS sort of piece. But yeah, there will always be a certain level of like service that we need to give to our clients. So within that, we'll always be operating a certain number of nodes just to make sure that there is that kind of base layer of transaction throughput that we can always count on. But then beyond that, we'll be onboarding a lot of node operators. And like I said, there'll be probably bounties for different areas that are kind of less loved. So to incentivize people to maybe set up their node in a different place rather than just having it in the country that they live in, which will be good. But, there's only so many nodes that we need, even in somewhere that has high internet traffic like North America or Europe. But we are planning on being a completely global network. Obviously that will take more time. And as we do that, there'll be, those bounties like flying around for different areas so that people can, kind of maybe play a bit more of the sort of game with it and chase those kind of higher rewards in the sort of less loved regions, perhaps.
Thanks for that. And interesting you say that about kind of using the validators to kind of push out to different areas that maybe not or might not be kind of as successful as the other areas. You speak about being kind of incentivizing users to be validators on like in another geographical area or like another sort of what's the word? Kind of like another like part of the industry. Would there be any like limitations on how many validators there can be for like a certain geographical area? Has that been any consideration?
No. So what we've actually kind of built into the system is the ability to use the bandwidth for various functions within the network. So it's not just like about you're validating a transaction that is an ad on a website necessarily. There's other parts of the full stack that we have. So, for example, like pre-bid we've spoken about, we are able to now run that on distributed nodes. Like that can then act as like another, incentive for publishers, because it's a lower cost than they're probably paying to run their pre-bid instance elsewhere on AWS or whatever, just by themselves. Like the same is true for the other side of the equation, which is like the demand side platforms. We again can also log lost data rather than just winning bid data. That provides like more information for advertisers to go and use in market and really feed their algorithms the information they need to have better buying strategies. So it's not just about your node will validate a transaction on the network. There's different types of nodes that will be running, and then those nodes can also perform different functions. And the idea is that we are as efficient as possible with the bandwidth that's available, and part of that is also having other functions that those nodes can do, and things like reporting and using it for other areas of the sort of whole ecosystem are important ways to basically make that happen, and make sure that we're being as efficient as possible.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. Really, really appreciate it. And I know you touched on it as well. With regards to the tokens and kind of having the kind of distributing it across the network kind of fairly, would they be like, just for obviously people who are joining the community recently who may not have heard it before, and people who will obviously hear this AMA back, is it going to be like tiered systems for the validators on the network, or is it going to be like kind of like a one size fits all approach?
So there will be like two different types of nodes, and they will have different costs and be run in different ways. We are going to be releasing like more information about that, so I don't necessarily want to like jump the gun on it, but there will be fractionalization available, as well as like full nodes. So that will provide pretty much everybody with the opportunity to validate transactions in some way or another. But yeah, as to like the specific details of that, I won't go into too much detail because I don't want to ruin the marketing party.
No, I'll stop asking questions now about that.
Sure, you already said too much.
Yeah, I think
probably.
Sorry, that's my fault.
That's probably my job, mate.
I'll be as vague as possible.
Yeah.
Give me details.
No.
Yeah, so I won't ask any more questions on that topic. But what I want to go back onto now is kind of back onto the ads on labs, and we've talked about the technical side of it. Chandru's been very good at kind of explaining it, kind of like a simple kind of view, like putting it across as like the eBay side of it, and how we can kind of interpret that and see in like the everyday aspects, not just thinking of crypto as being like really confusing. Chandru's been very good in what he said, and he's even made it more clearer for me. We spoke about the advertisers, publishers, and kind of what it means for the community. And one of the big questions I've got now: what does it mean for the future for ads on labs?
So yeah, I mean, I think just kind of generally for anybody who's using our network, there is obviously all the advantages that we've spoken about, but even just the way that the network works allows for a kind of plethora of like different products that don't exist right now. There's quite a lot of ways in which we are able to offer trading. So we always like to think of it as more akin to like high frequency trading in a sort of stock exchange than what exists right now as programmatic advertising. And with that'll allow kind of advertisers and publishers, or mainly advertisers, to sort of create different trading strategies. So algorithmic trading, for example, doesn't really happen in programmatic advertising. It's very much like, I am looking for this person, I will go across these sites and I want them to like be hit these times. So it's very basic version of kind of how you might execute trades. So yeah, by kind of having more of that data available to more people more of the time, it means that they can be more informed about the trading that they are doing. a lot of the stuff that underpins that information is based around cookies. It's been in the news for a very long time that there is the cookie apocalypse happening, although it's been going on for quite a while because Google just keeps kicking the can a bit further because their whole system is built on cookies. They can't really deprecate them at the moment. Every solution they've come up with basically fails on the GDPR level. So there's these holdouts like Google. So Chrome still uses cookies, Safari doesn't. So that effectively makes every Safari user unfindable effectively by advertisers, which means that there is at some point going to be a cookieless future. We're not quite there yet because Google needs to kind of get their stuff together, and Facebook is still using cookies a lot, and kind of that's why they've seen a decline in revenue, is because Safari doesn't allow them to track their users across Safari, but they are allowed to across Chrome. So those kind of nuances that kind of underpin what happens now, like cookies, is going to go away. So we've kind of been thinking a lot about what does Alkimi allow a cookieless future to be. So we've talked about it before, but the use of kind of Web3 wallets as a replacement for a cookie is definitely something that we think is going to happen, just because Web3 wallets are going to become ubiquitous anyway, regardless of what we're doing, because people like NFTs and people have cryptos, and Web3 wallets are very easy to use and they interact with websites. And that kind of last bit of being able to interact with websites is basically their kind of like magic, and that kind of allowing users to be in control of the stuff that's happening when the wallet interacts with the website. That is not too far different to what we call like consent management. So we've all seen, you get the notice that tells you like, we're going to use these cookies for this, we're going to use them for that, and you're like, okay, yeah, whatever, accept. But that isn't really how GDPR is meant to work. It's the very basic level of consent that's available, which is why kind of everybody ends up being tracked all the time. But there is a future where we talk about permission instead of consent. So rather than me just like bothering you or making it very difficult for you to have your normal user journey, and therefore like making it difficult and putting an accept sign, and you just say, yeah, whatever, get rid of it, you will actually be able to control which sites see what about you when. So it will really bring the user back into that value exchange like we've talked about many times before, but it really like flips the paradigm on its head. So the data is then not owned by those big platforms that we all know about, Facebook, Google, Amazon, etc., ad infinitum. It is then actually the user's data, and the user has the ability to control it, and also therefore monetize it. It's in a similar way to the way the Brave browser works, right? It has a wallet attached to it. They block ads, and then they show you their own ads, and then they pay you for it. It's like that is something that is available now, but there isn't really the infrastructure to make it work across the whole of the internet. That's why Brave had to do it in a browser format, but with what we have built at Alkimi, there is the ability to bring that model to sort of the wider internet, to like every website, every user, every browser. And that's that kind of one-to-many approach, rather than trying to get people to use a different browser, which is quite difficult. But I think kind of from an advertiser perspective, it will allow them to trade differently. And then from a user perspective, it's like, what does the cookieless future look like? And by having blockchain technology attached to the actual ad exchange, it means that there is more likelihood of Web3 wallets and other parts of that kind of ecosystem and those products to be able to be used for advertisers, which, again, just completely kind of so small differences that make a very big difference on the sort of end result. And it's that's one of those things that's really going to be changed by what we're doing at Alkimi.
Thanks for that. With regards to going back to the GDPR, for people that don't know, is the General Data Protection Regulation. When we look at kind of the shift from the cookies to Web3, just in your experience, guys, what is it? Are you finding it easier for kind of to comply with GDPR, looking at the retention of data and kind of not breaching that? Are you finding it simpler because it's more auditable?
Not so much, only because a lot of that data is like hashed anyway. So it's not, we're not doing anything necessarily unique in that sense. Again, it's that meeting the market where it is. We have to be able to be interoperable with the things that people expect now, even if it's not what we're aiming to do in the future. But a lot of these things are kind of off the shelf at the moment. So it's like we can work with them quite easily. But yeah, we're in terms of like GDPR, like Chandru had actually in a previous life created a GDPR compliant blockchain, which almost makes it the kind of perfect thing for Alkimi. It's
a simulation.
Yeah, that's why we know we're living in a simulation. But yeah, I think I'll hand over to Chandru then.
I think this is a very interesting conversation because while we do need to meet the requirements of our ecosystem partners, the expectations of the community, it is paramount that we comply with the regulations and look at this product from the eventual users, which is the people visiting the websites, the people who are targeted with ads, the people who will eventually buy those products. How would we as end users feel if our personal information finds its way onto a public ledger that is accessible by anybody? That is the question that we need to ask ourselves before we view ourselves as, Alkimi Exchange or a publisher or an advertiser. Before we are any of those, before we are publishers, advertisers, technology partners, we are end users. And if we don't want to use a product as an end user, which respects a product that does not respect the end user's personal information, then we've lost the battle. So it is very, very important for anybody in the ecosystem, be it the publishers, the advertisers, the technology partners like Alkimi, to be aware of what it means to be an end user and respect the user's privacy. And that is why we've taken a stand to have all of that data, all of the PII data off the chain. So there is absolutely nothing that will be exposed on the public ledger as far as PII information is concerned. So, and we will take all due care in order to secure that data that will be handled off chain. So there are quite a lot of precautions that every company should take, and we are striving towards meeting those requirements towards the regulation, and also to try and secure the data as much as we can.
Thanks, Chandru. And with regards to the kind of the retention of data and complying with GDPR and the likes of human rights, is there anything that you'd have to consider in the future that something cookies offer, kind of a disclosing certain public information with regards to what kind of Web3 wouldn't, or vice versa? Is there anything that once that shift changes from obviously cookies and how important that is at the moment to the ad industry, shifting that to Web3, is there any measures that has to be put in place to comply with GDPR more?
I don't think so. I think I would like us to be at the forefront of what that is, really.
Yeah, I think actually, like, interestingly, sovereignty of data is the perfect scenario that the EU were trying to achieve when they brought in GDPR. Like users having control of literally every piece of data that is about them that is transferred anywhere. So by using Web3 wallets and creating like permissions within that, that is how really data, like personal data, should be treated. So yeah, by creating the rails effectively to be able to build that on top of, we're making it a lot more likely. But also, yes, it is the kind of ideal set of circumstances rather than kind of cookies, which are just a bit out in the open for anybody to then target. And, you get all those kind of creepy ads because you looked at something recently and all that kind of stuff. So even just from a kind of user perspective, it's like there's nothing better than being in control of your own situation. So yeah, I think from that point of view, it's definitely helps.
Yeah, we did have some conversations quite some time back, Shaw, Ben, where we were discussing how consent management platforms can change in order to comply with the regulations in the Web3 world. But yes, I think all of that is definitely on the backlog, but I don't think it's high enough on the backlog to find its way into the roadmap, at least for the next few quarters. But I remember having those conversations, but just buried under our product backlog for now. Hopefully, once all of this is done, all of the node management is done, we'll probably revive those conversations.
That's the next thing that we're
Thanks for refreshing our memory there, really. Maybe it needs to find its way up the product backlog.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Chandru. Really interesting to hear you talk about that and kind of the pros of what Web3 offers, and when we talk about the cookie side of it. Is it in relation to cookies, just for obviously from people who are not of kind of like a technical background, that being able to kind of delete cookies from like a web browser and the internet, is that something which makes Web3 stand out further, and kind of the ads on labs by not being able to delete cookies and kind of not letting publishers and advertisers lose a potential target of like profit or to achieve a certain goal? Is that kind of better what you see in the future, shifting from cookies to that? Is that kind of another positive aspect of it?
I think I would say so. Yeah, I think the issue right now is that when you put it another way, there's too much content right now online for the kind of, I go online, I get free content in exchange for seeing a few ads. I think something that's gone wrong is that there's too much content, so people aren't prepared to view ads, and they just block ads, which is never a good thing. There is that then has kind of reduced people's user experience online, so the internet has become a more intrusive place to hang out. And I think that by using alternative solutions to cookies, particularly with a blockchain, there is now a means of transferring value of some description, whatever that may be, from an advertiser via a publisher to an individual that has surfaced their data with their permission for the first time. It's like if you were to, when you visited your favorite news site and share some of your information, be given something that had actual value to you, you probably wouldn't be opposed to seeing ads. And I think, again, by fixing the infrastructure versus what currently exists, and really what I mean by that is removing the fees, the double digit 40, whatever it is, 40 to 50% fees that are taken, a publisher will actually won't need to show as many ads because they're getting paid more of the money that they should have been paid with the existing Web 2 situation, but they haven't done. So like at every point with advertisers, publishers and users, the ineffectiveness of cookies in terms of the user experience has exacerbated every other issue that exists. Like publishers have to serve more ads to make up for the money that is being lost by people blocking ads, which means that advertisers are getting less effective ad campaigns, have to spend more money on media, which is potentially wasted, which could be going into product improvements, developments, you name it. So I think there are, whenever you guys, I'm using the expression a lot recently, but like pick up a paving slab in the garden and there's loads of creepy crawlies under it. Kind of as you do that with cookies, you see more and more issues that perhaps you didn't know were there that have been exasperated by that system. Like cookies were never really meant for targeting ads. They were meant to remember whereabouts in the page you got when you navigated away from a particular article online. It's really been used to the nth degree by advertisers, and I think that it's screaming out for a solution.
Aren't cookies like 40 years old or something?
Yeah, it's ridiculous, man. It's literally just supposed to be so remember the session. It keeps you logged into a page.
Yeah.
And it's now being used to retarget ads based off your search keyword history. It's wild. And that's, again, to kind of hark back to a point I made a while ago, there's been no real innovation in the underlying infrastructure of the way in which ads are traded online. So by delivering ads on labs proving that it's feasible to run an ad exchange on a blockchain, it really is the first step to innovating infrastructure that needs to be innovated. Frankly, it's kind of why we ended up existing. So
yeah, because really, it's like so many businesses are reliant on it. It's kind of wild that nothing's changed in the whole time the programmatic's been around.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, there's whole industries that are built off the back of it, and it's like pretty creaky infrastructure.
Even OpenRTB, the current iteration is 6 years old.
Yeah, it's nuts. Yeah.
So yeah, it's ripe for innovation.
Yeah, I knew it was quite a long time ago. I didn't think it was 40 years old. And when you think about how far technology, and especially crypto, has come along, even in the last year or two, having something kind of be in control of kind of what the ad industry is at the moment, it's just mad to think that something is potentially 40 years old, which kind of helps facilitate that current technology of what people like companies like Google and things like that, who are miles ahead in technology, are still using kind of these cookies which are outdated. Like you said, 40 years old. Just I didn't realize it was that long ago.
Yeah, I mean, like the yellow pages were still knocking around then, which is an absolute GDPR minefield.
Telephone directory.
Yeah, exactly. When I was looking at football transfers,
So what time the movie was on.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, guys. You've been really helpful today. There's been quite a lot of information to take in, and I'm sure everyone in the community would really appreciate it. I've got tons and tons of questions, but I'm hoping in the future we'll be able to do another AMA, and there's quite a few questions from the community. But I know I'm obviously quite conscious of your plans as well, guys, and we've been running over quite a bit now. So yeah, I just want to say thanks for your time today. You've been really great.
Yeah, just want to say a huge call out to everybody who's worked on this project. It may just be the three of us who are the face of the company, but there are so many people who worked on this project, made it possible, and a huge shout out to all of them who've made Ads on Labs possible, and also a huge shout out to the community. Thanks, guys, for all of your support. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you, everyone.
Here.
Thanks, guys. And just for anyone who has got any questions, if they can fire them my way again, I'll make sure I ask the team the questions. And Millie from the team has been quite helpful. Any questions that you've had tonight, just because we ran over quite a bit, if we can post them in the Telegram or post them to me, we'll get you the answer as soon as possible. But yeah, thanks, guys, for having me. I really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to hosting yourselves for quite a long time, and you're by far one of my favourite projects. Kind of what you're targeting and the work ethic of yourselves is just it's just amazing. So yeah, I just want to really appreciate the opportunity for hosting this. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for the kind words. Have a great evening.
Yeah, cheers, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
You too. Thanks, everyone. Speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.